The Crystal Cave by Mary Stewart, Book 3, The Wolf, 2. I crossed in early April, and on the same ship as before, but the crossing could not have been more different. This was not Mervyn, the runaway, but Molinis, the well-dressed young Roman with money in his pocket and servants in attendance. Where Mervyn had been locked, nailed in the hold, Molinis had a comfortable cabin, and marked deference paid him by the captain. Cadle, of course, was one of my servants, and the other, to my amusement, though not his, was Merrick. Hannah was dead, having overreached himself, I gathered, in a little matter of blackmail. Naturally, I carried no outward sign of my connection with Ambrosius, but nothing would part me from the brooch he had given me. I wore this clipped inside the shoulder of my tunic. It was doubtful whether anyone would have recognized in me the runaway of 5 years ago, and certainly the captain gave no sign, but I held myself aloof and was careful to speak nothing but Breton. As luck would have it, the boat was going straight to the mouth of the Twy, and would anchor at Maridunum, but it had been arranged that Cadle and I were to be put off by boat as soon as the trader arrived in the estuary. It was, in fact, my previous journey in reverse, but in the most important respect there was no difference. I was sick all the way. The fact that this time I had a comfortable bunk and Cadle to look after me instead of sacks and a bucket in the hold made not the slightest difference to me. As soon as the ship nosed out of the small sea and met with the windy April weather of the bay, I left my brave stance in the bows and went below and lay down. We had what they tell me was a fair wind, and we crept into the estuary and dropped anchor just before dawn, 10 days before the Ides of April. It was a still dawn, misty and cold. It was very quiet. The tide was just on the turn, beginning its flow up the estuary, and as our boat left the ship's side, the only sound was the hiss and chuckle of water along her sides, and the soft splash of the paddles. Far away, faint and metallic, I could hear cocks crowing. Somewhere beyond the mist, lambs were crying, answered by the deeper bleating of sheep. The air smelled soft, clear, and salty, and in some curious way, of home. We kept well out of the centre of the stream, and the mist hid us from the banks. If we spoke at all, it was in whispers. Once, when a dog barked from the bank, we heard a man speaking to it almost as clearly as if he had been on the boat with us. This was sufficient warning, and we kept our voices down. It was a strong spring tide, and took us fast. This was as well, for we had made anchor later than we should, and the light was growing. I saw the sailors who rowed us glance anxiously upward, and then lengthen their stroke. I leaned forward, straining my eyes for a glimpse of the bank I could recognize. Cadle said in my ear, "Glad to be back." "That depends on what we find, Mithras. But I'm hungry." "That's not surprising," he said with a sour chuckle. "What are you looking for?" "There should be a bay, white sand, with a stream coming down through trees, and a ridge behind it, with the crest of pines. We'll put in there." He nodded. The plan was that Cadle and I should be landed on the side of the estuary, away from Maridunum at a point I knew from which we could make our way unseen, to join the road from the south. We would be travellers from Cornwall. I would do the talking, but Cadle's accent would pass with any but a native Cornishman. So we're going to change how we do Cadle's voice. I had with me some pots of salve and a small chest of medicines, and if challenged could pass as a travelling doctor, a disguise that would serve as a pass to more or less anywhere I wanted to go. Merrick was still on board. He would go in with the trader and disembark as usual at the wharf. He would try to find his old contacts in town and pick up what news he could. Cadle would go with me to the cave of Galapus and act as connecting link with Merrick to pass over what information I got. The ship was to lie for 3 days in the Tywai. When she sailed, Merrick would take the news back with her. Whether I and Cadle would be with him would depend on what we found. Neither my father nor I forgot that after Camlec's part in the rebellion, Vortigern must have been through Moradunum like a fox through a hen-run, and maybe his Saxons with him. My first duty was to get news of Vortigern and send it back. My second, to find my mother and see that she was safe. It was good to be on land again. Not dry land, for the grass at the head of the ridge was long and soaking, but I felt light and excited as the boat vanished under the mist, and Cadel and I left the shore and made our way inland toward the road. I don't know what I expected to find in Moradunum. I don't even know that I cared overmuch. It was not the homecoming that made my spirits lift, but the fact that at last I had a job to do for Ambrosius. If I could not yet do a prophet's work for him, at least I could do a man's work, and then a son's. I believe that all the time I was half hoping that I would be asked to die for him. I was very young. We reached the bridge without incident. Luck was with us there, for we fell in with a horse trader who had a couple of nags in hand, which he hoped to sell in the town. I bought one of them from him, haggling just enough to prevent suspicion. He was pleased enough with the price to throw in a rather worn saddle. By the time the transaction was finished, it was full light, and there were one or two people about. But no one gave us more than a cursory glance, except for one fellow who, apparently recognizing the horse, grinned and said to Cadel rather than to me, "Were you planning to go far, mate?" I pretended not to hear, but from the corner of my eye saw Cadel spread his hands, shrug, and turn his eyes up in my direction. The look said all too plainly, "I only follow where he goes, and he's crazy anyway." Presently, the tow path was empty. Cadel came alongside and hooked a hand through the neck strap. "He's right, you know. This old screw won't get you far. How far is it, anyway?" "Probably not nearly as far as I remember. 6 miles at the outside." "Uphill most of the way, as you said?" "I can always walk." I smoothed the hand along the skinny neck. "He's not much of a wreck, as he looks, you know. There's not much wrong with a few good feeds when put right." "Then at least you would have wasted your money. What are you looking at over that wall?" "That's where I used to live." We were passing my grandfather's house. It looked very little changed. From the cob's back I could just see over the wall to the terrace where the quince trees grew. Its brilliant flame-coloured blossoms opening to the morning sun. And there was the garden where Camlac had given me the poisoned apricot, and there the gate where I had run in tears. The cob plodded on. Here was the orchard, the apple trees already swelling with buds, the grass springing rough and green round the little terrace, where Moravik would sit and spin while I played at her feet. And here, now, was the place I had jumped over the wall the night I ran away. Here was the leaning apple tree where I had left Asta tethered. The wall was broken, and I could see in across the rough grass where I had run that night, from my room where Cedric's body lay on its funeral pyre. I pulled the cob to a halt and craned to see farther. I must have made a clean sweep that night. The buildings were all gone, my room, and along with it, 2 sides of the outer court. The stables I saw were still the same. The fire had not reached them then. The 2 sides of the colonnade that had been destroyed had been rebuilt in a modern style that seemed to bear no relation to the rest. Big rough stones and crude building. Square pillars holding up a timber roof, and square deep windows. It was ugly and looked comfortless. Its only virtue would be that it was weatherproof. You might as well, I thought, settling back in the saddle and putting the cob in motion, live in a cave. "What are you grinning at?" asked Cadel. "Only how Roman I've become. It's funny my home isn't here anymore, but to be honest, I don't think it's in Les Britain either." "Where then?" "I don't know where the Count is, that's for sure. That will be this sort of place, I suppose, for some time to come." I nodded toward the walls of the old Roman barracks behind the palace. They were in ruins, and the place was deserted. So much the better, I thought. At least it didn't look as if Ambrosius would have to fight for it. Give Uther 24 hours, and the place would be as good as new. And here was St. Peter's, apparently untouched, showing no sign of either fire or spear. You know something? I said to Cadle as we left the shadow of the nunnery wall and headed along the path toward the mill. I suppose if I have anywhere I can call my home, it's the Cave of Gallipus. Doesn't sound all that Roman to me, said Cadle. Give me a good tavern any day and a decent bed and some mutton to eat, and you can keep all the caves there are. Even with this sorry horse, the way seemed shorter than I remembered it. Soon we had reached the mill and turned up across the road into the valley. Time fled away. It seemed only yesterday I had come to this same valley in the sunshine, with the wind stirring Aster's grey mane. Not even Aster's. For there, under the same thorn tree, was surely the same half-wit boy watching the same sheep as on my very first ride. As we watched the fork in the path, I found myself watching for the ringdove. But the hillside was still, except for the rabbits scurrying among the young bracken. Whether the cob sensed the end of his journey, or whether he merely liked the feel of the grass under his feet and a light weight on his back, he seemed to quicken his step. Ahead of me now I could see the shoulder of the hill beyond which lay the cave. I drew rein by the hawthorn grove. Here we are, it's up there above the cliff. I slipped out of the saddle and handed the reins to Cadle. Stay here and wait for me. You can come up in an hour, I added on an afterthought. And don't be alarmed if you see what you think is smoke. It's the bats coming out of the cave. I had almost forgotten Cadle's sign against the evil eye. He made it now, and I laughed and left him. And that's the end of chapter 2.